This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello and welcome to Circuit of the Americas. Yes, it is time for free practice 2 from one of those tracks that just brings a special feeling to everybody. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of fans will pour into this track, which is about half an hour away from downtown Austin, to watch 20 men take to the track in what is always a circuit that delivers, I think. And one of the things that I'm surprised by, and I shouldn't be surprised anymore, is the ingenuity of the fan. I have just seen something quite extraordinary, Jack Nicholls and Jolyon Palmer. A man who is up on the first level of the grandstand, which must be, what do you reckon, about 10 metres high? Something like that. Throw down a baseball cap for Christian Horner, the team boss of Red Bull, to sign, but the hat was on string so that he could throw it down.
I like that.
Horner signs the cap with the pen that is attached to the string as well, and then the string is then wheeled back up to said fan, who now has a signed Christian Horner Sergio Perez cap. How cool is that?
It's great. Ingenuity. And I'm, you know what? I'm surprised that Horner did that, because he tends to ignore any kind of cap. Hey!
Oh, it's the joke of the day.
That was obviously allegedly, etc., etc.
Well, no,
I was just doing a.
It doesn't have to be allegedly, because the FIA have found them in breach.
Correct, but ignored made it seem like a wanton disregard of the rules, and perhaps it wasn't that. We'll wait and see. And also,
Don't get bogged down in that.
Producer Paddy gave me that joke, so I have to give him credit where it's due.
Producer Paddy's on fire in that case. Fun of the day. It is an hour and a half session. We know Max Verstappen has already won the championship. Red Bull looking to win the Constructors' Championship this weekend, and they could do that. It's likely, I think, Jack, that they will do that this weekend.
Yeah, highly likely. Obviously, it'll happen at some point this season, and yeah, it's pretty likely that they will do it this weekend. You never know what's going to happen. Of course, they could both have a double retirement, and stranger things have happened. In fact, it did literally happen this year in Bahrain, didn't it? With at the start of the season.
Feels like a long time ago.
Yeah, well, it was. So, yeah, they'll win the Constructors' Championship. I think we all struggle to get too worked up about the Constructors' Championship, honestly.
OK, well, don't get too worked up about it, for goodness sakes. Jolyon, Carlos Sainz was the fastest man out on track earlier on today, which hopefully bodes well for a good race this weekend.
Yeah, from what you can take from an FP1 session, but it was the only session today that's going to be taking place with the tyres that we're going to be using this weekend. This session that's coming up is an hour and a half of Pirelli tyre testing, basically, so it'll be a slightly different FP2, which means FP1 was more important than usual, and Sainz was top, Verstappen second, Hamilton close as well. All three teams separated by less than half a second, which is nice.
A couple of moments until we get the session underway. Jack, is it worth us just explaining the Pirelli tyre test a little?
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously get into it when it actually begins, but I think the fundamental is they'll all be running on Pirelli test tyres for next season. That's the long and short of it, and as a result we won't know exactly what tyres they are running at any point in the session, because they're not marked with the sort of yellow, red and white bands that constitute because also they're testing more than just soft, medium and hard, right? They're doing different sort of tyre combinations, with the C3, C4, C5, C10, all of that kind of stuff. So we'll get into that more as the session progresses, but basically, yeah, it's going to be tricky to work much out from this session. But the thing is, we do have 5 drivers who didn't take part in the free practice session earlier on, because we had 5 rookies in for FP1, so they will be on a slightly different run plan.
Yeah, also worth bearing in mind that Sergio Perez will have a 5-place grid penalty this weekend. He's taken a new internal combustion engine, and Zhou is the other driver who will also have a 5-place grid penalty. We're expecting that Charles Leclerc, who missed the session earlier on today, will be added to that list. Let's wait for the FIA to publish their document. Who knows how long that wait will be. There we go. I think we should do a sync up, and the cars are leaving. They're going.
Yep. 5 seconds to go before the session even begins, but Daniel Ricciardo is keen to head to the end of the pit lane. So it was Ricciardo, Leclerc missed the running, Latifi missed the running for Williams, Valtteri Bottas missed the running for Alfa Romeo, and Kevin Magnussen missed the running for Haas. So those are the 5 drivers who are about to get their first look at this Circuit of the Americas. Bottas and Ricciardo out on the medium tyres. So therefore, because they missed the running in free practice 1, they are able to use the regular tyres. So we will see 5 drivers on tyres that we understand. For those of you syncing up, we've got 1 hour and 29 minutes and 27, 26, 25, 24 seconds on the clock. And Andrew Benson, chief F1 writer of the BBC, this Pirelli tyre test was meant to happen in Suzuka.
Indeed. So in a nutshell, Pirelli are testing their 2023 specification tyres, new compounds, different construction, over 2 race weekends, here and in Mexico next weekend. It's the harder compounds here in Austin today, as it would have been in Japan 2 weeks ago, but the rain put paid to that. There's a new C1 compound, which is the hardest of all, to try and, because people don't like the C1, they thought it was too hard this year, so it's a bit softer. The C3 is new to try and better position it between the 2 and the 4. The front tyres will be run at 2 psi lower pressure than they have been so far this year, because the construction in theory has better integrity. The tyre pressures are still pretty high this year, much higher than the teams and the drivers would like them to be, so that'll be a step forward that they'll be a small matter pleased about. Unfortunately, for those wanting a spectacle in this session, and not only will we not know what tyres the teams are on, although they're running the softer compounds first, Mario Isola, the Pirelli F1 director, told me earlier. The problem is that the tyre test programme, which is mandated by Pirelli, only lasts 50 minutes, and there's 90 minutes of session. The idea was to give the teams a chance to spread themselves out so there was less traffic, but of course that means less action. And I was speaking to Andrew Shovlin, the Mercedes trackside engineering director, between the sessions, and he said when they're finished they're just going to park up.
But who listens to our free practice coverage for what's going on track?
Not very many people, so let's get into the other stuff.
Roger does. Roger and who's the other one? Who always emails in angry? Roger and I can't remember. Email in, and I've forgotten your name, and I really apologise for that. An hour and 27 minutes to go. Now, why, if the C1, I'm getting stuck straight.
You've gone straight for the tyres when you said let's not.
I'm going straight for some noisy tyre chat. If the C1 is too hard, just get rid of it and don't have it as an option, surely.
Well, they have to have 5 different compounds. That's the rules.
What rules?
Formula 1 rules.
Oh, okay, fine. So, well, they can't just say now, let's just not bother and bring...
They could change the rules, but the rules say there are 5 compounds over the season.
But effectively that's what's happened, because the C1 has been avoided pretty much when it could be avoided, because it's not been a good tyre. So even then, when there's been the C1, C2 and C3, the hardest compounds, everyone's just gone for the soft and medium for the most part. So they're trying to make it more usable as a hard tyre. It's all a bit... It's going to be small margins of just changing the pace and degradation effectively between the hard, medium and soft for various weekends.
Yeah, and actually one of the most interesting bits of the exchange I had with Mario Isola, I thought, was that I said, what about making the tyres more durable in terms of the drivers being able to push harder on them? Because I spoke to Sebastian Vettel in Singapore 3 weeks ago, and of course he's a bit more able to speak more freely now because he's retiring. And what I'm about to tell you is not a secret in Formula 1. The idea of these new tyres this year was to enable the drivers to push much harder for much longer on them. Really, not really many people have seen that much difference, and that's what Vettel was saying. He said the tyres are really not any different than they were before. Mario Isola completely disagreed with that. He said that Pirelli had done a survey of the drivers and they're all really happy they could all push much harder and follow much more closely. Now, I think they can follow more closely for longer, which is to do with the aerodynamic characteristics of these new 2022 cars. But I don't think any driver who you took aside privately would tell you that the tyres were any significantly different in terms of being able to push hard for long on them.
This feels like a survey feedback thing in The Apprentice, doesn't it? Where they come back with very specific feedback. When they're told, oh, do you like this product? Everyone says no, and then they go back to the boardroom and they're like, everybody loved the product. And market research, that's the one I was looking for.
But degradation's been a defining factor of this season. On qualifying pace, is neck and neck between Ferrari and Red Bull. On race pace, Red Bull are ahead because the Ferraris suffer quite big deg at this stage of the season particularly. So obviously they can't just drive around and push as they have done. In fact, the deg seems higher this year in many cases than it was last year.
It's John. John's the gentleman, and I'm really sorry for forgetting your name, John. I apologise. Thank you for Kaylee for pointing
He's
that
emailed
out.
in already? No.
No, but he will be. But thank you for listening anyway. Tom says, new C1 sounds like a Ferrari strategy. It's a new hard, but a soft hard. Yeah, pretty much. Vettel across the line, and he goes 13th fastest at the moment. Everybody has gone out on circuit bar Lance Stroll and Mick Schumacher. Charles Leclerc is quickest at the moment on a 1 minute 38.8 on the soft tyre, 1.6 seconds quicker than Daniel Ricciardo on the medium tyre in the McLaren. Then Bottas third, also on the medium tyre, and then everybody else, we don't know what tyre they're on specifically. Gasly, Verstappen, the top 5, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Norris, Ocon and Zhou, the top 10, and then Perez, Albon, Vettel, Alonso and Latifi, the 15 drivers to have set a lap time. Schumacher has now left the pit, so that's good news also for Kevin Magnussen, that they were able to repair that Haas, because Giovinazzi put it in the barriers this morning, but they're all already out on circuit, Jenny.
Yeah, they've done good work there in the garage. As you say, Giovinazzi, they said they were going to replace the gearbox. They've been able to do that clearly in the time that they've had in between free practice 1 and free practice 2. What hasn't happened in between free practice 1 and 2, unfortunately, is any update from the FIA. There has now been a meeting between the president of the FIA and Christian Horner. But there is no resolution. Red Bull still don't know the outcome of or the penalty that they will receive for the cost cap breach. And we are expecting in the next few hours to find out, but then we've heard that story before. So don't hold your breath is all I'm going to say, but let's see if it happens this afternoon at some point.
Well, Jenny, I do have a very small update on the budget cap situation for you. So the situation as it stands is that the FIA have offered Red Bull an accepted breach agreement, which means that Red Bull have been told the penalty that the FIA intend to give them, and it's now up to them to decide whether to accept it or not, or go to what's called an adjudication panel. We don't know what the penalty is because the FIA and Red Bull haven't told us yet. That was yesterday's news. After the meeting between Ben Sulayem and Horner, it's emerged, I'm told, that the reason Red Bull haven't decided yet is that there's a bit of a disagreement within the team as to what the best strategy is in this situation. The option is they could accept the accepted breach agreement. That means that it could be interpreted as meaning they've cheated, basically, as Zach Brown called it in his letter that we published on Monday. And some people in Red Bull don't want to make that their public position. They would rather fight it. The problem is that if they go to the adjudication panel, there's absolutely no guarantee, and many people would say quite the opposite, that any different outcome would come, and they may even get a stiffer penalty than the one that's already been proposed. And Red Bull haven't decided as a result of this discussion what the best course of action is. Do they accept this ABA? Do they go to the adjudication panel? What are the consequences of that for them as a team, and particularly the team's public image, because it's the public image that really counts here, although the penalty will affect them in some ways, obviously performance-wise.
So it's your classic guilty plea, right? If you plead guilty and accept a lesser sentence, fine, but you're accepting your guilt. Whereas if you plead not guilty, you could still be found guilty and get a bigger punishment, or you could be found not guilty and everything's fine.
Exactly, that's the risk. So the ABA is effectively, as you say, Jack, it's cutting a plea bargain with the police in this scenario. The police being the FIA, they're saying, we're saying you're guilty, we've got evidence that you're guilty, you've broken the budget cap, this is how we're going to punish you. If you want to take it further, be our guest. But then the risk for you is it potentially gets worse.
Inspector Ben Sulayem. There's a crime, ITV4 crime show drama for you.
Is there a deadline for this?
No.
So if they
just decide next year.
Well, I guess eventually the FIA is going to run out of patience with Red Bull not deciding, aren't they, you would think. But as of now, there's no deadline being communicated publicly, put it that way.
That would be such an FIA thing to happen, wouldn't it? That there was no deadline written into the rules, so Red Bull can just wait till they leave the sport in 2045 before deciding whether to take it or not. I'm sure that won't happen. I'm not that sure, but probably won't. Charles Leclerc quickest. He's improved his lap time on that last lap, a 1:37.614. It's 5:10 in the evening here in Austin now, so the sun is... I mean, it's not setting, it's nowhere near setting, but it's starting to lower in the sky, so the reflections coming back up off the tarmac, and the car's looking very pleasant as the sun begins to fall on this autumnal day in Texas. Well, this fall day in Texas, I suppose.
Doesn't feel very fall-y, though, does it, at 30 degrees at, 5:10 in the afternoon?
That's true. That's the one problem, actually, with using the word fall instead of autumn, is you don't get to use autumnal.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cactus around here too. There's another problem with the word fall.
Well, yeah, that's very true. I was actually reading about this in the airport on the way here. It was because we think of it as an American term, but it was always a British term, fall. And then autumn only became popular after the sort of British people had left to go to America, and then autumn became popular, and so...
Well, presumably that's because of its French origins, automne. So maybe the Huguenot population that came over from France when the Protestants were being persecuted in the 16th, 17th centuries in pre-revolutionary France, maybe they brought that word with them and it became popular then. I don't know, I'm speculating.
No, but fall over here is the word, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. That, historically, that timeline would fit. If anybody knows the answer to that, the...
Hashtag BBC F1. Shakespeare always used autumn rather than fall.
Okay, so I might be a bit wrong on my Huguenot timeline speculation then.
But I think
I should know that, really, but this wasn't covered in my history degree at university.
Was it
the
not?
origins of the word fall and autumn.
I think that there are 7 instances of Shakespeare using the word autumn in his work. Mostly... Not in many plays, mostly in sonnets.
That's quite a fact to have in your pocket.
How have you got this in your locker?
Like I was reading about it when I got to the airport. So, yeah, everybody used to say fall. Well, the autumn, it was equal usage. And then everybody came to America and they kept saying fall. And in England, autumn got real popular, like in the 18th century. 18th, 19th century.
Trendy. The trendy word.
Yeah. Speaking of... I can't segue it. Jenny Gow.
Trendy. Yep, that's me. By the way, the wind is, once again, I don't know if you can hear and pick it up in my microphone, but it's really strong again, and it's kind of swinging from a headwind to a side wind as they come down the start-finish straight. So, yeah, gusty, but still very warm in the sunshine. It's quite delightful. It feels like summer rather than fall. And the 7 occurrences of the word autumn, please tell me that some of those are in A Midsummer Night's Dream.
I actually think you might be right.
Must be, surely.
I think it's A Midsummer Night's Dream and then some of the sonnets. But
There we go.
I can't quite remember, honestly. Hope you're enjoying this, John. 1 hour and 16 minutes to go. Charles Leclerc has done the fastest first sector of anyone, 26.180, and so he is improving on this lap. He's just coming into the hairpin of turn 11, where he then gets on the power and heads down the back straight, up through the gears in the Ferrari. Most of the other runners have returned to the pits. It's Leclerc, Ricciardo, Verstappen, Magnussen, Schumacher and Albon who are out on circuit at the moment. 198 miles an hour for Leclerc before he gets onto the brakes into turn 12.
It's worth pointing out, Jad, that Leclerc is running standard tyres because he didn't take part in the first session. He was replaced by Robert Schwartzman, one of the Ferrari development drivers. So he's running a normal program right now. He's allowed to do that. He has a specified amount of time where he can do that before he gets on with the 2023 tyre testing later.
Yeah, so we will see sort of more running from those 5, you would have thought, than everybody else in this session. Leclerc's done the fastest middle sector now of anyone. Comes into the final corner, out across the line, and he sets a 1:36.810, 8 tenths quicker than he'd managed previously. And as we've said, his first run
today, having had Robert Schwartzman in that car earlier on. Everyone else has done pretty much 2 flying laps and come straight back into the pits on their first set of Pirelli test tyres. So a run plan designed by Pirelli, they've done it, and then most of the cars have fled back to the pits. A couple have headed back out, Alonso and Vettel leaving on another set of tyres. The medium tyre looks pretty good compared to whatever they've been running so far.
Well, also that's a tyre that's a medium tyre time, 36.810. It's also the fastest time of the day so far, so quicker than his teammate Carlos Sainz went setting the pace in first practice on the soft tyre.
Jenny Gow.
Yes, just a note as I come down to Williams. Logan Sargent, who ran in free practice 1, he is the hot tip to get the Williams seat. The slight issue is that he doesn't have enough super license points as things stand. So he needs to hope that he can collect those as he goes along with the results, I think, of Formula 2 in Abu Dhabi, if I've got that correct. But he did pick up another licence point earlier on today when he took part in free practice 1. So I think he's now on 28 points, if I've got my maths right, which is 1 point closer to the holy grail of getting his super licence and therefore being able to sign for Williams, if that's what they choose.
He's high on odds getting it for Sargent, because there was the big debate earlier on this year for the other American driver, Colton Herta.
Yes, I was just thinking, we haven't had this chat, have we, really, on air? With you?
Not with Jolyon, no.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know the chat that I've missed,
the floor is yours.
Well,
well, you've got to tell me what chat.
So, Jolyon,
super licence points go.
The debate is, should the FIA have made an exception for Colton Herta? He's clearly good enough to be in Formula 1, but he hasn't got the points for various reasons for three seasons of IndyCar. Red Bull wanted to run him in the AlphaTauri, but because he hasn't got the super license points, and there are quirks to his past 3-year history in IndyCar that they could have found an exception if they wanted to, but they decided to stick with the system, even though many people in Formula 1 would argue that the system is flawed because it undervalues the IndyCar championship.
That isn't the debate, though,
isn't it?
The debate is, what is the point in super license points, full stop?
Okay, well, the answer to that is simple.
It's a two-pronged debate, isn't it?
The answer to that is simple. The super license points are there, I think, fundamentally to stop bad drivers getting into Formula 1 with huge bucket load of sponsorship, which Mazepin was in Formula 1 last year, didn't do himself justice, but he was fourth in Formula 2 the season before.
Who's it stopped getting an F1 seat, do you reckon?
Maybe the answer is no one, but you'd never know, because they'd never try and get into Formula 1 now with no super license points.
Maybe Nissany.
And you don't want to see a driver that can't do well in Formula 2. It's not that hard to pick up super license points in Formula 2, which is the feeder series for Formula 1. You get them for Formula 3, you get them for every series out there pretty much. And if you're good enough to make Formula 1 the pinnacle, then yeah, you've got to show some talent in the other series by winning, if not the series, many races, and have a good championship standing. I don't have a problem with it. Some teams in the past have been tempted to go for drivers that haven't even really achieved. I mean, we go back to the 90s or the 80s, there were some terrible drivers in Formula 1 with just massive backing that could prop up a team. Thankfully, Formula 1's in a really healthy place now, and the structure of it and the boom of the sport has meant that actually everyone's chasing performance, and they're not so desperate to survive as they were even in the last decade. There were teams struggling.
So that's kind of my point, is that it's not a thing that is relevant anymore. Like, we can't think of a driver that it stopped, but that it saved us from. But Logan Sargent can't quite get a seat, and he's decent. Colton Herta's not allowed to get a seat.
If they're not good enough, if Logan
no one's signing them these days.
Yeah, but if Logan Sargent can't qualify for a super license this year because he's come out of the top 6 in Formula 2, then yeah, don't sign him for Formula 1.
Yeah, but we've wandered off the point, because the point is about Colton Herta, not about Logan Sargent.
Okay, so in my opinion,
this is a different situation, because he hasn't raced in Formula 2, because he's been in IndyCar. And IndyCar, just to be clear to everybody, the super license points awarded in Formula 2 are 40 points each for first, second and third places, and 40 points is enough to get us a Formula 1 license. In IndyCar, it's 40 points for first, 30 for second and 20 for third. And is that right? Because it smacks of protectionism, some would argue.
100%. It rewards those who go through the FIA series.
Yeah, okay, so now I get to your question. And I believe the super license points still have merit, because you never know what can happen in the future. The issue is that IndyCar is undervalued. And so that's the area that they should look at, because there are some brilliant drivers in IndyCar, and there are some XF1 drivers in there who have qualified in the junior series, but actually can't get in the top 3 in IndyCar now. So it shows the talent that's out there. And yes, Colton Herta technically, I'm sure he would have equipped himself well if he was in Formula 1 next year. So that's what they need to look at. Just make IndyCar much higher point scoring to qualify, in my opinion. Because if you're a Formula 2 driver, let's take it back to the norm. When was the last time someone came out of IndyCar directly to Formula 1? It's not really a problem that's been an issue for a very long time. Was it Sebastian Bourdais? Yeah. I would guess. Yeah. Before that, Montoya. Yeah. So there's been 2 in like the last 30 years.
And Zanardi,
Villeneuve,
and Villeneuve, and then Michael Andretti before him.
So we're going right back to the 90s, basically. So it's not an issue that's come up until this year, where I said the talent pool in Formula 2 it's not the strongest year this season. Yeah. Champion Filipe Drugovich is not racing in Formula 1. Maybe Williams should have taken him if Logan Sargent can't get in the top 6 in the championship. Try taking the guy that won it. But fundamentally, it's an issue that they've found this year, a bit like scoring or full points in Japan because of a quirk of the rules. Maybe they could have made an exception for Colton because of that and introduced these new IndyCar points this year. But at least it's got to come next year, because there is that, the cynic would say that the points are there to protect the Formula 1 ladder and stop people going to IndyCar. So both arguments, I think, can be true. But I don't mind if Logan Sargent can't finish in the top 6. He's 3rd at the moment. I'm sure he will do it. But if he doesn't, then do it again next year and get in the top 6 for your super license points, is my opinion. Don't go in Formula 1.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just feel it just feels, to me, it just feels, I don't know, it feels a bit unnecessary. It just feels sort of unnecessary for no real purpose.
The funny thing about
who was this brought in?
I was about to say,
who was this brought in to stop people getting into Formula 1?
Because of Max Verstappen coming in.
Because we don't want people like Max Verstappen coming into Formula 1. It's bizarre.
Yeah, but Jack, it could be Nikita Mazepin though. Let's say Mazepin, okay, in the end he finished 4th in Formula 2, but what about the year before? He was already a bit out of his depth in Formula 1. Maybe he could have come in the year before and been completely hopeless. So agreed, you don't know who it stopped getting in because they're not in there because the rule's there.
Agreed, but I think I don't disagree. But if a backmarking team, it's a shame if a backmarking team go for the money, like Williams with Stroll and Sirotkin back in, what was that, 18, I think. It's a big shit, but hopefully with budget caps and all of that, we're not in that scenario anymore.
But if you change the IndyCar rules, then it's not stopping anyone getting into Formula 1 anyway.
But they're not going to change the IndyCar rules. This is the whole point. Like, you make a very good point, but or maybe they will change the IndyCar rules. I don't know that for sure. But Bethany says, #BBCF1, the main thing the super license points does is make sure young drivers spend a fortune in FIA series. Says Bethany.
As opposed to what?
All the other ones that they've got rid of by making it the only way you can get into Formula 1.
How you're going to racing costs money somewhere, doesn't it?
I don't disagree with that, but anyway, we don't need to get bogged down in junior formula. Here's Alonso. Alonso reporting that Hamilton has no mirrors today. Just like Spa.
The American series ladder is also it's a different series. There's not FIA and it's their own thing, but yeah, it's just a different way. I guess the point was that it's not FIA, so they're not pushing it, and that's what we said before, really. So they just need to adapt it because there's good drivers out there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. What I presume Nick De Vries got points for winning Formula E, and that's why he can get a super license.
Well, he was first or second Formula 2 champion as well. That's enough to be.
But in 19, they expire, don't they? At some point, I think. Like Davide Valsecchi can't get a super license now.
I think I can't get a super license now.
No.
My hopes are dashed.
Jenny Gao?
Yeah, they definitely expire, but they changed the rules over COVID. to extend it, a bit like a loyalty system, I don't know, with an airline. They extended it so that it was slightly easier because there weren't as many races taking place, and I think that's maybe what's helped that situation. But also just with the cost cap now in place, I think you kind of mentioned it, Jack, a little bit, but does that not protect teams from just going for money drivers nowadays? That's kind of with the cost cap, that's not going to happen, is it? Doesn't really help them anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, I think, a healthy place. So yeah, I think you could probably take away a lot of the point system, because the reason it was brought in was partially to protect that. But I do remember the chat when Max Verstappen was signed up and came into Formula One, and everyone was like, he's too young, it's dangerous to have a driver that young in Formula One. I think he's done all right for himself. But I think there does need to be some sort of protection to make sure that drivers aren't coming in too soon. And that was meant to be one of the factors that were why super license points brought in, not just a financial thing, but also to make sure you have enough experience before you arrive at Formula One.
Yeah, that doesn't really feel like it's Verstappen did it. Everyone was stressed about Kvyat, and he was quite fine. Everyone was stressed about Alguersuari.
Kvyat was
quite
GP3
fine.
champion.
Yeah,
he
but
qualified anyway.
Too soon, let's say in inverted commas. Raikkonen had, 10 races in Formula Renault under his belt, or 12 or something. So yeah, it's interesting. Lando Norris has just had a nice little slide coming into the pit lane. Bit of opposite lock as he entered the pits there for Norris, currently 6th quickest. I'm now curious, and I will not get round to doing this, but how many solid drivers from the past maybe wouldn't have had enough super license points to get into Formula One?
Yeah, I think you'd have to be really, really bored.
Marcus, like a Marcus Ericsson, would he have had enough super license points? What did he do in GP2? Did he ever finish in the top?
He finished 6th.
Do you know what? I wonder if
He would have been a bit.
I wonder if Fernando Alonso wouldn't have qualified.
He's not getting super license points for winning Formula Nissan
And
3000 or whatever it was.
One race in Formula 3000.
Yeah. Alonso's not qualifying. I'm not sure Ericsson's getting into F1. Now he's Indy 500 race winner and had a good F1 career, friend of the show. I don't think Ericsson's allowed in under the super license points. That's a bit weird. Oh, let's listen to this.
That's wrong. We have to show also that initiative we want to reach.
This is Mohammed bin Sulayem.
And I want myself and the
He's talking to Toto Wolff.
I'm sure, I'm optimistic that within some of, like in the work and in the rallying, that we will come close. I hope so.
It's impossible to know what they were talking about there, but my broad speculation would be he's convincing Toto Wolff and the Mercedes team that they're going to reach some decision, he hopes, with Red Bull, but I might be wrong.
I thought that initially, but then he started talking about WEC and rallying, which confused me at the end.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think he realised that the mic was on that camera, did he?
No, he hasn't got the racing driver nous, has he, of knowing not to talk when the camera's on. An hour and 2 minutes left on the clock. Hashtag BBC F1 if you want to find out drivers in recent years who wouldn't have been allowed in Formula One.
But let's say
legislation.
Let's say Kamui Kobayashi would be. Was GP2 Asia champion? Would that have scored points? I don't know. Or Marcus Ericsson, or some drivers didn't make it. Who would have made it instead? Who have we missed out seeing because we've had drivers that wouldn't have made it? You never know how the parallel universe would pan out. We might have had another triple world champion, but said driver back then missed out. Maybe Valsecchi could have shown us actually in Formula One he's an absolute class act.
Tokyo Drift.
Tokyo Drift, says Carlos Sainz. Is he getting in?
Sainz is, yep. World Series champion.
Yeah, okay, fine. Kevin Magnussen, World Series champion, or was he runner-up in the end?
World Series champion.
Did he not lose to Kevin Magnussen?
He is Kevin Magnussen.
Oh, so I thought you said Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, and then we moved on to Magnussen.
They were back-to-back champions for Dams. Gasly was runner-up. Maybe to Sainz.
In 3.5?
In 3.5, yeah.
Before he won GP2?
Yeah.
Formula E champion gets 30 super license points. Thank you, Amit. Obviously, I should probably have known that. Charles Leclerc quickest on a medium tyre at the moment. Well, his lap was on the soft, but now he's onto a run on the mediums. He's 7 laps down on this run. Bottas is second quickest. A reminder that 3 drivers at the moment have been on regular tyres. Everybody else is out on Pirelli test tyres, so we don't really know what they are or what they're running, but we have exactly 1 hour left on the clock now. And yeah, hashtag BBC F1 if you can name some drivers who wouldn't have made it into Formula 1. Michael Schumacher Michael Schumacher's not getting let in under your rules, Palmer, is he?
I don't know. What are the points for WEC?
I don't know. Did he win the championship, or was he just quick?
It was a long time ago, and I don't remember.
You can't remember the 1990 sports car world championship season off the top of your head?
No, sorry.
Schumacher did some F3. No,
he won the German F3 championship.
And he raced at Macau.
And he won Macau by taking Mika Hakkinen off.
Yeah, but I don't.
He might be qualifying on that.
What? Winning German F3, you're getting enough points for a super
Probably, because German F3 was strong back then. It was Britain and Germany with the sort of 2 peak F3 championships.
You've still got to go to F3000, haven't you?
I'm not sure. I don't know. It depends on how they allocated the points, doesn't it? If Palmer would have to decide if it's his system.
Yeah, and obviously he's going to fix it so that it works out that Schumacher would have got to drive.
But the other thing is, for when we're harping back 20 years...
Damon Hill's not getting in.
When we're harping back 20 years...
Damon Hill is not getting in
that's true,
under your system. But so you are wiping Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, Max Verstappen...
Fernando Alonso.
Something big is loose around my pedals. Copy that, box this lap.
Magnussen's got something big loose around his pedals. So Michael Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, Damon Hill, Max Verstappen, you are not letting into Formula 1. That's what we're saying right now. This has not gone well for you, Palmer.
No, because, Jack, the world's changed. The world's changed. Back 20 years ago, there was a plethora of different series that were all valuable and could be good to get into Formula 1. Now it's pretty much honed down to what Formula 1 teams are looking at anyway to try and get in. There's fewer Formula 1 teams and fewer Formula 1 seats out there anyway. So the talent pool is so confined to maybe having 1 or 2 rookies each year. And of those that you're mostly looking towards Formula 2, potentially you're taking a Formula 3 champion if they're standout. This year, for the first time, as we've discussed, in 15 years, they're looking to Indy because Red Bull thought they saw an exceptional talent there.
Whoa, Charles Leclerc's just had a big old slide coming through the S's. He's managed to catch it on those medium tyres and carried on his way.
So you can't harp back to the 90s for this debate. You can't harp back to the 90s. That's
okay,
a bit
Marcus
far.
Ericsson.
Someone else who wouldn't get in is Gilles Villeneuve.
Oh, you can't harp back to the 80s.
70s.
Yeah,
70s
actually,
even.
What did Fangio and Farina do to earn their super license points? Fangio won some rallies in Argentina. Anyway, now we're getting silly, but we're not silly overall, I think. So,
well, Jim Clark would have nailed it.
yeah,
He was still racking up the points.
absolutely. Yeah, because they were racing F2 every
Exactly,
other weekend,
he was
or
just
even
topping
the
them
same
up as
weekend.
he was going.
Yeah, absolutely. So less than 57 minutes on the clock. His teammate Charles Leclerc is quickest at the moment on a 1 minute 36.8, but this is predominantly a tyre testing session for Pirelli, so they're using tyres that the Italian brand hope they'll be using next year, so it's going to be difficult to read too much into it, but there's no doubt that Ferrari are looking strong. The final hour is on Sports Extra. "56 minutes and 17 seconds to go. I think if you're out with Ericsson again tonight, you got to tell him, by the way, I don't think you deserve to be in Formula 1. That's what you got to tell him.
But the other thing is,
Will you tell him that?
I'm not saying that I wouldn't adjust the super license points anyway. I'm saying that I would adjust them.
So this is a U-turn that we're.
It's not a U-turn.
I've said
I've said it from the outset. I think IndyCar's undervalued. I would pump up the points for IndyCar. I'd probably pump them up for Formula E as well, and maybe Formula 2, because there's a depth of talent out there.
So now it's just Oprah. You get super license points. You get super license points. You get super license points. Then what's the point of them if everyone gets them?
No, but I think It's Indy, isn't it? There's undervalued particularly, and Formula E. The champions of Formula E they're either ex-F1 drivers already, or they're drivers that are about to be in F1. So it shows the calibre out there. There's undervalued.
55 minutes and 13 seconds on the clock.
And I'm not telling Marcus. No.
Okay, well, we'll clip this up and send it to him. Leclerc's returned to the pit lane now, as has Bottas, Ricciardo, Sainz and Schumacher, who are the top 5. Norris is still out there on the test tyres, as is Verstappen in 7th. 8th is Hamilton, 9th is Gasly, 10th is Sergio Perez. Magnussen, Tsunoda, Russell, Joe and Stroll are the top 15. Ocon, Alonso, Albon, Vettel and Latifi, the 20 drivers. Jenny?
Yeah, just a Mercedes. They're just getting ready to send Lewis Hamilton out. So his number 1 mechanic steps back, puts his thumbs up, just having a look down the pit lane. The unmarked Pirelli test tyres on there, and Lewis Hamilton goes down the pit lane towards the giant flag above Phil Hill, which I love, and it's very easy to tell the wind direction from that. And off he goes.
54 minutes and 15 seconds on the clock.
So just as a quick where we're at in this session, you've got the drivers that have run the weekend's tyres, the legitimate tyres, are pretty much at the top. Leclerc, Bottas and Ricciardo. There's then 1.4 seconds from Leclerc to his teammate Sainz, who's top of anyone on the test tyres, and there's a massive spread of different pace on the test tyres at the moment. Schumacher's the second fastest driver on the test tyres, then Norris, and it's just a real spread. So it's very difficult to call what is going on when we don't know what the tyres are, and clearly they're all on slightly different compounds and they're figuring it out for themselves, the drivers. What it does look like is they're either on higher fuel trying to test these tyres as well, or the tyres are harder compounds than the medium and soft that we've got on now, because they are slow.
Amit has saved the day. Schumacher was 5th in the World Endurance Championship in 1990, which would be 12 points. If you assume German F3 is the equivalent of Formula Regional European Championship, then winning that in 1990 would be 25 points, and being third in that in 1989 would be 15 points. So he'd have 52 licence points, Michael Schumacher.
So you're trying to tarnish my argument with fake news.
No, that's all, but that's enough, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm allowing Schumacher to race.
I apologise.
We're going to have to fact-check everyone else that you said that I was stopping racing?
Well, no, because the others were definitely true. Schumacher was a question mark. Hamilton out on circuit, as Jenny said earlier on. The teams, how do the teams feel, Andrew, about this tyre test? Is it a frustration because they can't get any work done for the weekend, or actually they can still do enough meaningful running even though the tyres are not the tyres they're using this weekend?
I haven't actually asked anybody that question.
Okay.
But in the brief conversation I had with Andrew Shovlin of Mercedes, he didn't seem too bothered about it. I'm sure they've had plenty of running in P1, and these tyres are not that different. I don't think they'll be able to, with the information that they do have about the tyres, because Pirelli dropping some pretty strong hints to the teams, if not to us, what tyre compound on it each time, because they have to change the setup depending on what compound it is. So the teams will know, is this a softer compound or a harder compound because of that. So they can cross-correlate and extrapolate plenty of information out of this, I'm sure.
Ericsson beat Takuto Iguchi to the 2009 Japanese F3 title.
Oh, and is that
maybe
those points
he's qualifying from that with his GP2 top-up?
Maybe.
You need to run some maths on that.
Alex has also said a driver who has previously held a super license but has not held a valid license within the previous 3 years is subject to the completion of 300 kilometres at race speed in a representative F1 car over no more than 2 days as part of a test certified by a national racing authority or as part of an official F1 session. This must be completed no more than 180 days before their application.
Which is how Robert Kubica got his licence back.
So you can get your licence back, no problem.
Oh, well, this is great. I assume that's why no one was calling me up for next year's drives. That's a shame.
Maybe you could go and be third driver at Haas with Magnussen and Hülkenberg.
Get the band back together.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
50, who did you...
I'll wait by the phone. I'll wait by the phone.
50, most of us have mobile phones that we take with us, but
They've not been calling that. I'm going for the landline. Mobile must be faulty.
Leclerc's still quickest, and he will be for the rest of the next 50 minutes. Bottas is second in the Alfa Romeo, Ricciardo third in the McLaren, Sainz fourth in the Ferrari, and Schumacher fifth in the Haas at the moment. Lance Stroll is on an improved lap currently, for what it's worth. He's just coming through the first sector. Jenny?
Yeah, just on the whole feeder series and listening to you guys talk about super license points, we are expecting Formula One to announce plans shortly that will be a all-female feeder series, which would be looking at like an F4 car and a clear route into F3, F2 and hopefully F1 in the future. Now this is going to be aimed at kind of 16-year-old plus, but they definitely want a younger demographic to try and pull that through, and I find it absolutely fascinating. Of course, this weekend was meant to be W Series and a double header for them, rounding out their season. That's not happened because of funding issues. Now, this new feeder series, which we haven't been told what it's called or anything like that yet, but this feeder series is supposedly meant to coexist alongside W Series. It's not to replace it or take over from it. But I'm relatively excited by this. I think it's kind of what I hoped would happen initially and in the first place. So it sounds very exciting. It sounds it would be an international series. And as far as I'm aware, beginning next year. And I find it utterly fascinating. So this is just breaking today.
So, I mean, I know we don't have much detail on it, Jenny. I have none. But it's the same as W Series?
Well, no, because the age group they're targeting would be younger, and it would be run by Formula One and the associations around Formula One. So it would be
But it's the same. It's the same principle of a championship for only female drivers.
Yes.
So it's.
Yes, I mean that's the essence of it. But it would just be a clearer pyramid route in, and that starts younger.
So it's below F3, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
It's effectively it's going to be W Series, isn't it? Because it will kill W Series. There's not enough depth of talent out there that W Series will survive
or
alongside.
Money for that matter.
Yeah, alongside what most drivers would deem as probably the stronger option going forward, particularly when W Series haven't been able to complete their season this year. So W Series cannot compete alongside this, which means that it will become effectively the W Series Championship, albeit run differently and hopefully more productively as well, because we haven't seen a driver actually come out of W Series to go and race in anything higher up. Jamie Chadwick has been the standout. She's done very well. Hopefully she can do next year.
Just on this, F1, when asked, wouldn't provide further details, but they have said they are committed to ensuring greater opportunity for talented women drivers to progress and reach the top levels. And they said it would provide more details on its plan in due course. F1 also said they wanted to add praise for the W Series for the work they have been delivering over the past few seasons. I haven't yet spoken to Jamie Chadwick, who is a 3 times reigning W Series champion, about the subject. And I know she's out in America this weekend, but not here. So I'm going to have a chat with her about it, and I'll probably just have a little message with Alice Powell and the likes to find out what they think. But this is very clearly a move to try and get to a younger demographic of females coming through, which is, I think, what they need to do. Because no offence to Jamie Chadwick, she's absolutely brilliant, but she's very unlikely to find herself in Formula One because she's older. She's starting out on that path at an older level than she probably needs to be to get here.
I think that's why, for me, that's the thing that, and you know, brace yourself, listener, because 3 white guys are about to have a chat about this. But Benson says he's not even going to. But that's the thing that I think W Series can and hopefully has done is inspire the next generation of young women to get into racing, right? I think that's what I was never really saw the point of W Series initially when it was announced, but actually it's a really strong they all became really strong role models, I think, for young women who wanted to get into racing, and I think that's the positive, and you're sort of starting to see that a little bit with Gigi Noda coming through and Garcia and, you know, this younger, and Abby Pulling, the younger people coming through to then, you know, try and perform well, and that's kind of where the future could have been, and I think, but that will take time for it to come through. So I think, yeah, it is a but that's the it's difficult. It's difficult.
And do you need, in a all-female series, do you need the best drivers that you can get as well to be a benchmark and a learning step for some of the younger drivers? If they have a Jamie Chadwick, Alice Powell would be 30 at the start of next season, but they are two of the reigning champion, the all-time champion of W Series, and a consistent front runner, Alice Powell. If you're a young driver and what you're wanting to do is nurture a woman to compete in Formula 3, Formula 2 and get to Formula 1, you've got to be learning from such a young age as well. So the best way to do that is to race against the best drivers. You can learn more from kind of getting beaten, or at least trying to match up to a really good driver. It's the same in Formula 1 as well. And coming close or even losing, then you can just demolishing a lousy teammate. Mick Schumacher this year will have learned so much more going up against Kevin Magnussen than he did last year beating Nikita Mazepin every weekend. So it's the fine line of sort of giving them the competition and the depth to improve, so then when they do move on, there's they're better, basically.
What teammate did you learn the most from? Was there one that stands out where you were like, oh wow, this guy?
I think Hulkenberg.
Yeah,
he was the most thorough of the drivers. I had Grosjean Maldonado, who I learnt from because it was my first time in Formula 1 as reserve.
Did you have any in the junior formula? Were there any in F2 where you were like, oh, this guy's...
I was teammates with Ericsson.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a really good teammate. We got on well, and maybe not after this show, but we got on well. And he's a very good driver, so there was always stuff to learn. And I think in Formula 1, all different drivers are working so differently as well. Grosjean and Maldonado were different characters, but maybe not the best to learn from when I was reserve. Magnussen had his own way of working. He was quite relaxed, naturally talented, and then Hulkenberg was more meticulous, and his attention to detail was another level that I hadn't seen from those drivers before.
Do you want to know the next driver banned from Formula 1 under Palmer's regime? Ayrton Senna.
British F3 champion.
Yep, that's 10 points. And then before that, it was just Formula 4 championship.
And you're changing the rules.
No,
you're changing the rules. British F3 was the F3.
Yeah, there's no way there'd only be 10 points for British Formula 3 in 1983. Give me a break.
It's true, though, isn't it?
It's fake news.
We have got 41.5 minutes to go. The order is what it was. Charles Leclerc quickest, Bottas second, Ricciardo third, Sainz fourth, Schumacher fifth, Norris, Verstappen, Hamilton, Gasly and Perez the top 10. Also, and this is Amit again, Mick Schumacher wouldn't have made it through because National F3 only get 10 points, so he would have only had 27 points at the end of 1990, Michael Schumacher. So he wouldn't have been given a super license by Palmer. So
he's spouting so much.
41 minutes left on the clock, and Verstappen running around now. He's just left I think he's just on a cool-down lap actually, Verstappen, and then carried on his way, coming into the final corner now, and he comes through to do a 1 minute 42.0. So that is 2.5 seconds slower than he has previously managed during this session. But again, we don't know what tyres they're on at any point. Verstappen now with the same amount of wins and championships as Fernando Alonso.
Yep. Similar age, presumably, as well. Getting it. Fernando was quite young when he came through. He was the youngest champion when he won it in 2005, wasn't he? Which has been beaten by Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah, still about 10 of his wins came with Ferrari, didn't they? After something like that. Maybe it wasn't quite 10, but not far off that sort of number. So he wasn't quite as high a level statistically as Verstappen at the same age. But it is similar, yeah.
Yeah, the championships, but his championships were both like last year's championship, with Type 4 rivalry with another team. Perez coming into the pits, so you can hear
Bit of a spark on the front left as the wheel nut came off. Quite a lot of a spark.
It didn't quite grip on right, did it? The wheel cup. I'm surprised at the criticism of Pirelli's wets, but we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, because as exciting as that sounds, let's hear from Jenny. She's got a guest.
I do. I'm just going to wait. Lando Norris is just going, so I'll wait for him because it's noisy. But I'm delighted to say we're joined by Alex Palou. Alex, first of all, I don't think I nailed your surname there. Can you say how I meant to say your surname?
Yeah, it's Palou. It's like low, Palou, but you can say it however you want. So
okay. Whenever I meet someone who's coming in, they always say, "You just say what you want," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I want to get it right."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know it's tough from Spain. It's also tough for Spanish people, so that's all right. I don't care. It's not important.
It's lovely to see you here this weekend. Obviously, you've been associated and working with McLaren for a while, but this is a different thing, going out on an F1 weekend to take part in a first free practice session. How did it feel?
Yeah, it's been awesome. A good experience for the past, I don't know, month and a half that started working with the F1 team, doing some testing with the 2021 car in Barcelona, my hometown, and then we did a little bit in Austria as well. So yeah, I think we did an awesome job to help me prepare to be ready. But today was something else, obviously, an official session with all the team, all the fans, and all the drivers as well. So it was tough at some points, like with the traffic and all that stuff. I know the pressure that you have, that you only had a set of tires and it was only an hour. But yeah, I think we did the job that we could with the limited time we had. Had so much fun, learned a lot, and yeah, looking forward to cheer for the team during the weekend.
We've been having a chat on air about the super license system and the points and the fact that at IndyCar you don't get as many points as potentially an FIA feeder series. But you've been going great guns in IndyCar. Is coming to F1 now the dream for you?
Yeah, I'm not worried about super license points because we already have it. But it's true that I think that IndyCar, it's such a tough championship that it would deserve a little bit more points. Maybe not as much as Junior Series in Europe because that's the path that they want us to follow. But a little bit more help for some IndyCar drivers that had opportunities like Colton. I think he deserved it. He's an amazing driver. He got the chance from several F1 teams, but he didn't have the license. But still, not my work, not my business either. So yeah, obviously F1, it's the top series in motorsport. So obviously I want to be here. But already being here and getting to know how an F1 team works, how the drivers work with the team, it's good for me to translate it to IndyCar. So yeah, it's all good. Having a lot of fun and enjoying every single moment.
Tell me, what's the actual difference when you get into the F1 car in a session? How does it feel compared to what you're used to in IndyCar, and what's the experience that is different?
Yeah, it's crazy. I tested many cars in my entire career, from F4, F3, F2, Super Formula, GTs, DTMs, a lot. But Formula One, it's on a league of its own, lots of power. The amount of acceleration and how fast you get to the top speed, it's insane. But then the downforce, it's crazy. So super fun car. And yeah, hopefully we get to drive it again.
I was going to say, do you know what your expectations are when it comes to a plan to get you here in a full-time seat? It's obviously not going to be next year, but what are your thoughts for the future?
Yeah, no, really. The plan for us was to get us ready for FP1 because obviously with the new rules, each team, they have to put at least one rookie driver. So it was a good experience for me. There's no plan beyond this. Hopefully there's more. Who knows? We'll be waiting. And it's my IndyCar off season now. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But it's been a good experience so far.
Well, let you go. Put your feet up, have a relax. But it's lovely to get you on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So great to hear from Alex Palou, winner of the final race of last season in IndyCar at Laguna Seca after a bit of a tricky year. I've just whacked my headset completely off my head there, so that was that noise.
And it was so surprising struggle to get it back on, Jack. I'm not quite sure what was going on there.
because you have to hold the microphone with one hand, so I sort of ran out of hands with the headset down over my eyes like I was Geordie LaForge. But we've got 34 minutes and 37 seconds left on the clock. Palou back in IndyCar next year with Chip Ganassi Racing. As I say, won the last race of the season. Wasn't in title contention going into the final rounds. 34 minutes and 22 seconds to go, and Leclerc is still quickest. And he's doing his test tyre running now, is Charles Leclerc. Valtteri Bottas in second position, Ricciardo third, Sainz fourth, Schumacher fifth. Now the conversation we've all been waiting for, Jolyon Palmer's thoughts on Pirelli's wet weather tyres.
Well, here's the thing. I'm surprised that on the face of it, other people
also wouldn't have got into Formula One under your rules. Carry on.
I wonder what his thoughts are on Pirelli's wet weather tyres. Max Verstappen's thoughts was that he's not happy with them. So
none of the drivers are, Jolyon.
My question is, when have they used them?
They don't use them because they're not happy with them and they want to be on the Inters as soon as they can.
So what do they want from the full wet?
They want it to be quicker. The problem with the full wet is the Inter doesn't disperse as much water as the full wet. But in anything but absolutely monsoon conditions, the intermediate is faster. So if you're racing, you want to be on the fastest tyres, so they put on the intermediates. But that puts Formula One and them in a edgy situation, as we saw in Suzuka on the first lap, because the Inter's not quite capable of dealing with that standing water, and that's why Sainz crashed, and that's why the recovery vehicle came out, etc., etc.
I don't know if anyone's asked this. They probably have. Should that race have started in Suzuka?
Yes.
That was fine to start the race.
The FA, that's what the FA concluded in its review that was published earlier today.
I think it was okay to start the race.
But 90 seconds later, it was too dangerous.
Well, you've got to remember they were all on intermediate tyres. The full wet tyres are better for clearing water. So if the teams decide...
But surely full wet tyres better for clearing water means more spray, less visibility.
But this is the exact problem with the extreme wets. No one wanted to be on them. That's why they all went on the Inters.
But they're on the Inters for performance.
Yeah.
So everyone at the start of Japan was greedy for performance. They knew it was soaking wet. Was it going to be a safety car start? Would it even start? Yet they went for intermediates. And actually, as it turned out, probably if someone had started on the full wets and it wasn't straight into a safety car red flag, that full wet would have been the right choice, as Gasly pitted onto.
Or maybe the FIA should have mandated the full wets, because the problem was that...
And then start it because to do that, you start behind the safety car.
Yeah. I mean,
or it's a way of doing it.
Yeah, that's one way. You could start on the full wets. There's no rule saying you can't have a standing start on full wets, I don't think. But so... The other issue is that when the safety car goes round, they don't get a full sense of how wet the track is and how bad the visibility is going to be with the safety car, because it doesn't bring up anywhere near as much water as a Formula 1 car does. And then when they all get on the Formula 1 cars and go flat out, it's suddenly like a white wall. And that's what we were saying earlier. Fernando Alonso, even behind the safety car, he never saw that there was a recovery vehicle on track.
So the Pirelli wet weather tyres, they're irrelevant.
Exactly.
Because the spray that these cars produce, if you need the wet weather tyres, you won't be able to see, so you can't start the race.
This is my point. So why criticise the wet weather tyres? Because actually no one drives on them because it's the visibility's too bad when they could possibly be used. And maybe, technically, the full wet weather tyres could have been used in Japan. I reckon they probably could when the race was red flagged. But then the limiting factor is not about aquaplaning, which was an issue for the intermediates at that point, is visibility, which is then the next dangerous point and the reason for the red flag. So that's why I don't really understand the criticism of the full wets. a potential solution is to just rebadge the intermediate as a full wet and make a new intermediate as a softer, slicker intermediate, as a crossover tyre. Because
interesting,
at the moment, effectively all you've got is an intermediate.
Well, hang on, why not just have
a wet and a slick?
Why have an intermediate?
Well, that's effectively what we got now.
Exactly. So
because
just lean
the full
into
wets are redundant, aren't they? No one's using them unless you're forced to, and then you're pitting off them as soon as the race goes green, which is how Vettel and Latifi.
So all you just have
through.
A full wet and a slick. Would that work? A full wet, the full wets, the extreme wets, or slick
you
tyres?
chew up the full wets so quickly when the track gets dry. The crossover would be too big.
Okay.
So you need the intermediate tyre.
Yeah, the only track that works.
Could you make a worse intermediate tyre?
Well, not do that.
But like, as in an intermediate that worked a bit more in rainy conditions.
Well, I think that would be the ideal. You'd make an inter that's a little bit better in the full wet condition. So you'd make the inter more treaded.
That's it.
Well, then why not make an intermediate tyre that's better, and then you have a crossover? Because at the moment you have everyone wanting intermediates, no one wanting full wets, unless they are forced to do. And probably the solution in Japan would be to force everyone to start on the full wets, because the conditions were unknown but pretty wet. So you force them to do that, and then you have an intermediate that's a better crossover. Because at the moment, when people go onto intermediates, it's a tricky call. It's a really long call to go to a slick. The intermediate, we had slick intermediates in Turkey a couple of years ago. So no one wants to go on the slicks because that crossover is quite big. So I think you could have an intermediate. This wouldn't be essential because that's what we've got now. But that's why I'm just surprised at everyone's criticism of the full wet tyre, exactly, because we barely see it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
I guess the thing is they'd like to be able to have a wet that they can race on.
But you can't.
I know there's the issue of the visibility and everything, but you don't get the chance to find out whether you can race in those conditions at the moment because they're all trying to get off the wet so much.
I don't know. I'm starting to think that maybe we just have to accept with these cars, if it's pretty rainy, you're not racing because of the visibility. Because that is even with no standing water, the amount of spray these cars produce is outrageous. When you look back at Spa 98, that would never run because there's a bit of spray coming off, visibility pretty bad, but nothing compared to today.
Well, the cars are so big as well now, aren't they? So naturally, the cars take up a much wider width of the circuit. They also, because the cars are big, the tyres are big, they are whipping up a load more spray than they used to. If you watch Spa 98, the cars are comparatively very small.
Yeah.
So they're taking up a
skinny little narrow tyres, weren't they?
Yeah, and so there is huge plumes of spray to the point that Schumacher drilled into the back of Coulthard.
Two drivers who shouldn't have been in Formula One.
They both should have done. and that's bad, but you could find the better line elsewhere on the track because the cars weren't so wide and the volume of spray wasn't as terrible as it is now. So it's this whole snowball effect of cars getting bigger, more downforce, and the ground effect probably just sucking the airflow underneath and flicking up water there as well. It's all just a snowball effect to make the visibility just shocking. And I had some races in Junior Series and then in Formula One where you're just thinking, I cannot see a thing. And watching some of the onboards at the start of Japan, you could see the drivers just trying to figure out where on earth they were coming into turn one.
Jenny?
Yeah, and Max Verstappen's just got out of the car. He's done 26 laps and he's parked up in the Red Bull garage. Just having a chat with Brad Pitt, actually, at the back of the garage. He's here because of a new film that he is making with some big Hollywood names as well. So that's exciting. But just looking at the lap counts at the minute and having a quick ponderance, I'm going to make my way up to the other end of the pit lane. But Magnussen's only done 16 laps, which is the least of anybody. Schumacher on 18 as well, so Haas clearly doing the least of anybody right now. And Russell's only done 19 laps. Stroll on 18. Everyone else is kind of up into the 20s, late 20s as well. So I will take a walk up to see what's if there's anything interesting occurring at Haas. But I just thought, and have a little focus. It's really, this session is very hard to report on from the pit lane because I can't tell you what tyres they're on. I can't tell you what they're planning to do. They're not coming in and doing pit stop practices. It's just a weird session for me. Sorry.
Jenny, I think it's because as I said earlier, the session's been made longer so that whereas with programs that don't fill the whole time, so the teams can spread themselves out and not all be running at the same time during the session. I would speculate that that's the reason why.
And I would also
do fewer laps at the moment.
And I would also suggest that Magnussen has his regular running to do as well, doesn't he? Because he didn't do free practice 1, so I think we'll see him go out shortly-ish on some mediums or something like that to do a little bit of running, or a soft or some such potentially. He's out on circuit at the moment. Leclerc is back in the pits. Bottas, Ricciardo, Sainz and Schumacher are the top 5. Schumacher's just left the pits in the other Haas. Norris, Verstappen, Hamilton, Gasly, Perez the top 10. Magnussen, Tsunoda, Russell, Zhou and Stroll the top 15. Ocon, Alonso, Albon, Vettel and Latifi are the 20 drivers. And there's with the wet race stuff, it just feels like we're getting to the point where the cars are too aero-y, and that's just how it is. Because I don't get scared commentating very often. My heart's rarely in my mouth in a scary scenario. When Sainz is bouncing off the barriers on the way towards Spoon, my heart was in my mouth. That was a bit of like a, oh, where is he? Is he going back in front of the whole pack? And you are getting the biggest shunt in Formula One history. That's kind of what it felt like it was. I was really worried it was going to be that.
Presumably you were feeling the same way about Gasly with the truck on the track.
Nah, because there was a replay, so
okay, you didn't go like,
yeah. Oh gosh, that was close. But as opposed to, when you see Sainz in the barrier bouncing back across in front of every other car, it's like this could be just huge.
Someone made a good point to me earlier this weekend, actually yesterday, because that was the only earlier point of the weekend that we've had so far, about the Gasly incident. Obviously Gasly was penalised for going too fast under red flag conditions, and he accepted he had done that after complaining about the recovery vehicle on track. But this person who's a very senior figure at F1 was saying it didn't really matter if he'd hit the truck, whether he was doing 300 kilometres an hour, 200 kilometres an hour or 100 kilometres an hour, he's still probably going to kill him. So that was the bigger picture. Yeah,
Jenny.
I was speaking to a few people from within F1. I won't name names, but they were all just a little bit frustrated that they didn't just look at the weather window, see what the opportunities were and move the race. Now I know broadcast times and commitments, blah blah blah, but we've seen it before, and you kind of have a weather forecasting system within F1 for a reason, and they had plenty of time to get that race sorted at an earlier stage in the day, run it well, run it safely, and there's just no flexibility when you feel like there could and maybe should be. It's a naive approach, but it's one that up and down the pit lane is thought.
It happens in IndyCar. There's often storm delays quite often in IndyCar. Nashville earlier this year, the qualifying got delayed by sort of 2 hours. There was no rain and the track was bone dry, but there were concerns about storms and lightning coming in and grandstands and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, that, isn't it? It's a tough, if you because here's the thing, because obviously you're doing that for the fans, but if you're a fan who then wakes up at 7 o'clock to watch the race and it turned out it finished at 3 and no one told you, or it got announced the night before and suddenly, oh well, the race is over, well, because they just decided to do it earlier that morning, be a little bit annoyed, I think. But yeah, it's an interesting theory. 21 minutes and 10 seconds to go.
It's kind of better to, instead of having a red flag and no race, at least there would be a race. If you're a fan and there's no race, okay, you get a refund, but better to get some track action, and at least if you know about it, you can come a bit earlier. But if it rains so torrentially, and we're now saying that if it rains you can't get a race away because of the aero, then
maybe don't race in Japan in monsoon season.
Well, yeah, let's not go back there. Deja vu all over again.
It's a fair. But there are pluses and minuses to to both sides, really, aren't there? And let's not forget, we got a full points checkered flag race. So everything was fine in the end.
That's the other thing we should clear up, by the way, rules-wise. In the FIA review, they said they are going to fix that points thing. Well, they didn't put it explicitly, but that's
But
what's
to
going to
mean
happen.
what we thought it was going to mean.
What it was meant to mean in the first place, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got 20 minutes to go. The sun's going to start to be a bit tricky for the drivers here, isn't it? It's certainly right in my eyes, looking out of the commentary box window. The screen is very backlit at the moment. So, and heading down that back straight, it is going to be quite bright, isn't it?
Is that why you knocked the headset over your eyes?
Yeah.
A little bit of shade.
Exactly.
It is bright. It's in certain corners, it just blinds you. Coming through into the final corner, it's going to be very difficult to get your eye line. Distracting. It's even harder to look in your mirrors, which are already the driver's best excuse for why they ever turn in on someone. Difficult to see. And it just makes it a little bit harder work, a bit more effort in the cockpit when you've got to squint down the straights and try and pick out your break point. But everyone's racked up plenty of laps now. 16 for Kevin Magnussen is the fewest out there. Most up into the mid-20s. Plenty of laps, know their way around. It's been a productive day for them, even if it's not been the most exhilarating day for us watching on, because we don't really know who's done what.
Jenny Gao.
Yeah, and some of the drivers have packed up for the session. The teams are working. Sebastian Vettel, for example, his car's up on the stands and they're starting to do the taking apart of the car thing that they do at the end of the day. And I've come down to Williams. Alex Albon's car's up on the stands as well. They've got the screwdrivers out, so they've finished. They're running for the day as well, and I just wanted to make it. Oh, I'm never going to make it down there in this link. Come back to me. I'm still on my way to Haas. It's been a very long time to try and get down here. Sorry.
That's okay. You got 18 minutes and 40 seconds. Leclerc, Bottas, Ricciardo, Schumacher, Russell, Joe and Stroll are the drivers out on circuit at the moment. And Leclerc, Bottas, Ricciardo are the drivers who missed out earlier on in the running in the first free practice session. Leclerc just on a 5-lap-old tyre, currently on one of the test tyres, and we've got 18 minutes and 10 seconds on the clock.
In many ways, it's a nice one for these drivers to give up in FP1, isn't it? Because there's just the possibility of more running and the extra tyres as well for those that hopped out of their cars for FP1. Leclerc, Bottas, Ricciardo all running on the medium or the soft tyres, which no one else has been allowed to use in this session. So they've managed to actually make up more of what they've lost than you would if you gave up your FP1 in any other weekend so far.
Jenny, there's something going on at Red Bull. Could you just have a go and see what's happening?
You are hilarious, Jack. Just because I've made my way finally down to Haas, which has taken, I think, about 20 minutes, which it shouldn't have taken, but I kept getting stopped by people coming into the pits and changing tyres. Yeah, that's it, right at the other end. There'll be even more at the other end next year because they'll get the #1 position instead of Mercedes. But no, I'm not doing that quite yet. But I have got eyes on Kevin Magnussen's blue eyes. He's just sitting in the car waiting to go out. I'm expecting him to have a set of race tyres on rather than Pirelli test tyres, I'm guessing. And as you say, the sun now is at an angle where if I just turn around and look into it, exactly what Kevin Magnussen's doing.
Sensible plan.
It's pretty bright. It's going to be quite difficult. But yeah, they've got him up. He's still a little bit raised up. They're waiting to take the tyre blankets off. He's getting a little jet of cool air. And yeah, they're going to take the cooling things out now. The engine turns over. No, it doesn't. Now the engine turns over. And it'll be going out shortly, Jack. Lovely.
Great news, everybody. Charles Leclerc quickest at the moment and still doing plenty of laps. 27 laps on the board now for Leclerc as he comes through the tightening left-hander at turn 15, and then he is flat out through 16 to 18, down 3 gears into the left-hander of turn 19, and then one final corner on the circuit at turn 20. On the power, out across the line, Leclerc doing a 1 minute 40.768 with less than 16 minutes on the clock, and I think he's avoiding a bump on the way into turn 1 there or something. It was sort of quite a dramatic move to the right to then brake for the first corner.
There's a change of tarmac just before, I wonder if that's caused a bit of a bump there that Leclerc's felt through his 28 laps so far. Jack, would you have rather Lewis Hamilton jumped into Formula 1 in 2004, 2005, after his Formula Renault title? Or do you think it was good for Lewis that he went through the ranks winning Formula 3, winning GP2, and then arrived for a title tilt in 2007?
Different.
Let's throw this back at you here.
Yeah, no, well, it's taken you an hour and 15 minutes to think of a response, but I'm proud of you for doing it.
I've been defending the barrage. I'm turning defence to offence.
Was Hamilton ready in 2004?
He'd won Formula Renault in 2004.
Who would he have signed for? McLaren? Coming in to replace Montoya?
I don't think he's signing for McLaren, but Verstappen came in to go to Toro Rosso. Should Hamilton have come in for a year at Sauber? A couple of years at Sauber maybe before getting the McLaren seat?
What I'm saying is, when they're ready, they're ready. When you want to sign them, you should be allowed to sign them. I think when you should be allowed to sign them when you want to put them in. I think that's going to be the key thing. So yeah, if Hamilton was ready in 2004, stick him in. But if he's not ready, let him do. I think, broadly speaking, my opinion would be let people do all the championships and go all the way up the ladder, because I think they learn more, is my sort of prediction. But I have no issue.
It's an interesting concept because all these drivers that you're claiming fakely wouldn't have made it to Formula 1, they would have probably just carried on in a different series, and they were good enough to make it to Formula 1. So they would have arrived at Formula 1 a better driver than they were when they turned up. Anyway,
Yeah.
Jack,
What
I can hear the
spout now?
tinkering of spanners in the garages as the work begins. The sun sets, a few cars still serenading us with their V6 engines. But with 13.5 minutes to go, it's time for this.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
My professionalism forbids me from just staying silent at this moment, but that's what I effectively might as well do, because of course there is no Long Run Corner.
There is. This is it.
There's no long runs to assess. Pirelli's mandated Pirelli long
Look
runs.
like they've been doing some pretty long runs out there.
Well, there's some information that you didn't know, Jack, because you weren't going around talking to people in between the sessions. The Pirelli mandated tyre test program, the longest run was 8 laps.
Bad news, guys. The news is there is no news.
8 laps is usually enough for you to get a long run.
Yeah, but what tyres were they on, Jack? You have to know
Pirelli
the tyre.
test tyres.
Yeah, but were they the soft, the C1s, the C2s, or the C3s?
Work it out.
I can't work it out.
So you haven't done any comparison of any of the front runners' lap times?
You know I haven't, because I've been talking nonsense to you two, and I've just been writing my report.
What does your report say?
What you expected to
Actually,
say.
can you read it out loud?
No.
That'll kill the last 12
They
minutes.
really will kill it.
Jennifer.
Thank you. So I down at Alpine, both cars up on the stands as well. They've finished their running for the day. Also finished for the day are
Is Andrew Benson?
AlphaTauri. Yeah, he's clocked off long ago. He'll be in the car going to a gig again in just a couple of moments, I would expect. Is there another gig tonight?
There isn't another gig, unfortunately, Jenny. I would love to go and see the one we saw last night again.
Are you allowed to say who it was?
Of course I am. It was Emmylou Harris.
Who I'd never heard of before this weekend, which I apologise for.
I would keep that to yourself if I were you, Jenny, to be honest.
It's fine. I can say that I'm musically naive when it comes to Emmylou. But I have now listened to some of the music. It's not for me, but I'm glad that you had a nice evening.
Fair enough. She is an American music icon and legend. And I think Jack can speak for himself, but I think he enjoyed it, and I certainly did. Yes, I was moved.
It was lovely. It was tremendous. But nothing tonight. Daniel Ricciardo.
I've got a bit of a time to fill before dinner, though, haven't we?
Yeah, that is true. Well, you told me to book it for that time. Anyway, we don't need to have this argument on air. 11 minutes to go, and Charles Leclerc is quickest in the Ferrari, and he's going to end the session quickest in the Ferrari. Ricciardo is out now. The Magnussen hasn't gone out. It's only Leclerc, Bottas, and Ricciardo that used their sort of prior allocation of tyres or their regular race allocation of tyres. Magnussen has not, and nor has whoever the other driver was that missed out in running in free practice 1, Nicholas Latifi. Latifi hasn't either.
Are you guys surprised that Ricciardo's not going to be on the grid next year?
Well, in the context of everything that's happened this year, no. But if you'd said to me at the beginning of the year, is Daniel Ricciardo going to do so badly in the McLaren this year that they're going to terminate his contract a year early, I would have said, no way, that's not going to happen. But it did.
But even in spite of that, are you surprised that he's not going to end up in a Haas or a Williams?
No, because I think he doesn't want to be in a Haas or a Williams.
But does that surprise you?
No. I think the bigger question about Daniel Ricciardo...
Does it surprise you?
Is he ever coming back? Because I don't think he is.
Well, this is the question. So it seems like he's going to be going to Mercedes as a reserve.
I don't know about that, is he?
That's the latest that I've heard. What have you heard?
He may do some reserve duties for Mercedes, I suppose. Yeah, it's been a thing that they talked about a couple of months ago.
This is the thing that I've heard as the most likely, or a reserve at a team that has been rumoured to be Mercedes, and that he's chosen not to go to Haas or Williams. And it surprises me because I think he's accepting that his Formula One career is most likely done at that point.
This is the thing, because if he won't go to Haas or Williams now, fair enough, he considers himself to be a frontline driver. He doesn't just want to drive for the sake of it in a back of the grid team. But he does say that he wants to come back in 2024. I don't see that there's going to be a seat that he wants, that he deems to be suitable for him, of a suitable quality for him, that's available in 2024.
And also, a year out, it's only going to make him less appealing to the teams that would employ him now.
That's right. It's one thing for someone like Alonso, for example, to take a year out, or 2 years out, as he did. It's another thing for Ricciardo, because Alonso went out on a high. He'd hammered Stoffel Van Dorn at McLaren in his last season. There was no question that he was still performing at a really, really high level. But that question mark very much does sit over Daniel Ricciardo at the moment, and every team that's looking at him will think that. Not only that, but all the top teams are already set with their driver lineups. You know, Mercedes, although Lewis Hamilton's contract runs out at the end of next year, he's 99.9% certain to sign another contract. I can't give away too much on that one, but that's definitely the case. I do have a bit of information on that. Russell's there. Leclerc and Sainz are locked in at Ferrari for a while. Verstappen's Ricciardo's not going back to Red Bull with Verstappen. And after that, McLaren are obviously set with Norris and Piastri. And after that, we're talking about teams that he doesn't want to be at.
And we're also talking about teams that don't want him now in the midfield. Alpine.
And he
McLaren
didn't want to go there either.
Yeah, but Alpine didn't want him back. McLaren have just
got rid of him. Yeah.
So to then hope that you can go back in at the top is hard. What I thought that makes sense for Ricciardo is to take a bit of humble pie, go to Haas or Williams, who on their day can be point scoring, and just try and get back to his old ways of being a race winner in a poor car, but at least demolish a teammate, rebuild in the way that Alex Albon has started to do, and then you've got a chance to try and move back forward if an opportunity came up.
Yes, I agree on one level. On another level, I can also see why he doesn't want to do that. First of all, I would have said the Williams thing is a bit of a poison chalice, because Albon's done a decent job this year. He's not that particularly highly rated, and if Ricciardo gets beaten by him, that really is career over because of those things. And Haas is Haas, isn't it?
Well, this is exactly my question, right? If you look at all of these drivers who have, let's say, dropped from a front team into the midfield and then impressed. So Valtteri Bottas at the moment, coming through turn 1, drops from Mercedes, goes into the midfield, looks pretty good and beats Joe and looks good.
Do you think Bottas looks good?
He looks fine. He's beaten Joe.
I've been disappointed by Bottas this year.
Well, okay, and I don't disagree with... I take your point, but I'm just making a more broader point. Gasly drops down to AlphaTauri, does a decent enough job. Again, has he? I don't know. Because Tsunoda's a rookie and a bit wild and whatever. But you look at these, and Albon, okay, he has destroyed Latifi, there's no doubt about that, but Nick De Vries came in and beat Latifi in his first ever Grand Prix. So if you do that, you impress in the midfield. Age 30, what's Ricciardo, 33, I think? 34. Are you then going back up, really? No. Bottas is never going back to a front-running team. Gasly's never going back to a front-running team. None of those who drop down into the midfield are ever going back to the front-running team. So that theory of go for a Williams impress and then move back up the grid is a nonsense, isn't it?
Well, you never know what comes up, do you? What people forget is Daniel Ricciardo has won 8 Grand Prix. He looked good in Toro Rosso. He beat Sebastian Vettel at Red Bull, looked very good until Max Verstappen came along and was better. But then he looked really good at Renault. Everyone forgets that. They think, oh, he messed it up when he left Red Bull, which on one side is true because he would have had better results at Red Bull than Renault. But actually, for his career reputation, he was doing great at Renault. He was ahead of Hulkenberg and then Ocon. He got them back to the podium. He was a great driver at Renault. It's just this last 2 years where things have gone wrong for him at McLaren. If he then came back to Haas or Williams and showed high caliber level of driving, then you'd put the McLaren years down to a random quirk that he couldn't get on top of potentially, and you still think, okay, this is the guy that's been good at every other team.
So are we talking more legacy?
No, I'm talking about, and then Perez has a tough year at Red Bull next year. Red Bull thinking, actually, maybe this guy can pop back in for a year or two as a stopgap.
And Ricciardo's going back to Red Bull.
Hey, what, from Haas or Williams?
Yeah, it's a really... Because I still... And I don't know why I think this, because there's no real evidence but I still fully rate Daniel Ricciardo. I still, despite this Haas year...
He's with McLaren now.
Despite this McLaren year, these last 2 years, I still think there's just something weird and inexplicable that is completely anomalous to the rest of his entire career driving racing cars. So I don't know what's gone on. He doesn't know what's gone on. McLaren don't know what's going on. No one knows what's going on. But it's just weird. And I am confident if you put him in an Alfa Romeo, he'd beat... I don't know if there are many people on the grid in the midfield that I would back him to be beaten by.
That's the oddity. But on the back of that,
I'm backing him to beat Albon. I'm backing him to beat Vettel and Stroll. I'm backing him to beat Joe and Bottas. I'm backing him to beat Tsunoda and Gasly, honestly. I think I'm backing him to beat Schumacher and Magnussen. And then you're into the top 3 where, yeah, I'm not backing him to beat Leclerc, Hamilton or Verstappen. But I shouldn't be, because he's been annihilated by Norris.
Yeah, so is Norris just a wizard, and he's going to be in a top car running away with everything, even compared to Verstappen and the like? Or is there something odd going on that means Ricciardo's not been able to get on top of that in 2 different years, in 2 very different cars? It's an odd story. But I feel like Daniel's just had enough, and the sort of negative spiral that he's been in for the last 2 years has just sucked the life out of him a little bit. So he just wants to have a bit of a break from it and consider his options rather than dive straight back in at the deep end and have to motivate himself again.
Jenny?
I think I remember, was it Grosjean took time out and then came back, and okay, you could say that he didn't reach any particularly heady heights in Formula One, but we have seen people take a year away from things. And I think this is the weird thing, that if he's looking to try and get himself back into Formula One, is taking a Mercedes, let's say if perchance he did do that, is taking a Mercedes role the one that you gamble on? I don't know. Like, I feel like there's less opportunity at Mercedes than there might be at Red Bull. Is he going to go back? Is he going to go back to a team that he's already driven for? Would they take him?
You've got to get some new merch. You've got to get some new team kit and stuff, and, you know.
Well, the best thing that can happen is, when you're a reserve driver for a top team, you get a chance to drive and show what you can do. George Russell basically has his seat now because he did that when Hamilton was out with COVID, showed what he could do. Nick de Vries has a seat for next year because he did that. And that's going to be, if Ricciardo does go to Mercedes as a reserve driver, that's going to be his golden opportunity to really show what he can do in good machinery again. That's his out. Without that, and that would be the same sort of anywhere, so you might as well do that in a top team, and as a reserve driver, you're hoping that you get a chance at some point for whatever reason. Beyond that, it's just difficult to see how he's going to be higher stock next year than this year without driving anymore. 40 seconds on the clock. He doesn't. I think the thing for me with Ricciardo, look, I don't profess to know the man particularly well at all. But from the outside, I'm surprised by the, it's F1 or nothing attitude a little bit. That surprised me, because if I had to guess, I feel like he'd be well up for going to do Aussie V8s or IndyCar, or like he feels like, and okay, the money would be nowhere near as good, and there's all of those things to consider. But he's such a motorsport nut, and you can really see him doing those sorts of things. But he's been it's F1 or nothing, which surprised me a little bit, to be honest. And he loves racing in the States.
Yeah,
turned up yesterday on a horse.
Yeah.
Every year in Texas, he's doing something wacky because he just loves the feeling of being here. IndyCar seemed like an obvious option for another potential avenue. And that might change in time. But I think I just get the feeling that he just wants just a little bit of a breather, having driven high level for a long time and then had a couple of disappointing years.
Yeah. Checker flag is out at the end of free practice 2. Amit says, Benson, do you wish you'd started watching Peaky Blinders instead of free practice 2?
I wish I'd watched Emmylou Harris again instead of watching free practice 2.
Charles Leclerc ends it quickest on a 1 minute 36.810. 7 tenths ahead of Valtteri Bottas, 8 tenths ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, 4th for Carlos Sainz, 5th for Mick Schumacher. Norris, Verstappen, I don't know why I'm reading this out to you, but Verstappen 7th, Hamilton 8th, Gasly 9th, Perez 10th, Magnussen 11th, Tsunoda 12th, 13th for George Russell, 14th for Zhou Guanyu, 15th for Lance Stroll, Alpine 16th and 17th for Ocon and Alonso. Nothing to read into that either. Albon 18th, Vettel 19th, and Nicholas Latifi completing the 20 runners. Out of the final corner, checkered flag falls, and it is Charles Leclerc who takes the checkered flag. 2 drivers taking the checkered flag at the end of this session.
Well, thank goodness. We got there. I feel for the fans a little bit. Some of them...
They got so much running, Jenny. Ricciardo did 40 laps.
Yeah, they got a lot of running. But there we go. We don't really need to talk about the session because the session's already happened. However, I wanted to play a little game with you guys because it's been one of those kind of crazy sessions. So, they've got a golf challenge down here in the paddock where you can do the longest drive challenge and see how many yards you can. It's like virtual. You're not actually hitting it off into the boonies around COTA. Who do you think is topping the leaderboard for the longest drive challenge?
I'm going obvious.
Alonso.
With Carlos Sainz.
Oh, right, sorry.
Because he's a really good golfer.
Yeah, Norris is a golfer. But actually, just a drive, you just got to whack it hard, haven't you? So who's an absolute brute in the field? Ocon. I'm going Esteban Ocon.
Ocon is so not a brute in the field.
I reckon Gasly works on upper body day a little bit.
Yeah,
he's bulked out.
He's
in
skipping leg
years.
day, isn't he?
Yeah, he's skipping leg day, but he knows his way around the chest press.
I'm going Joe.
Okay, well, I can tell you Ocon is in last place.
Yeah,
having got 62 yards. I'm tempted to give it a go because I feel like even I could do more than 62 yards. Alonso 67 yards.
What's a good drive?
Well, I can tell you.
200 plus, 100 plus.
300 yards.
Yeah.
I can tell you that because I can tell you who's topping the board and then you'll know what's good. Lando Norris is leading the board on 306 yards ahead of Albon, Sainz, Ricciardo and Gasly. And in fact, Gasly and Tsunoda have exactly the same distance at 257 yards.
Oh, I don't think I would have backed Tsunoda.
So the golf gang is basically at the top of the list.
Yes.
Norris, Leclerc and Albon, like we and Sainz.
What I wanted and why I wanted to play this slightly strange game is because Norris did such a Norris thing. He came in, he whacked ball, did all right, and then spent apparently half an hour in the zone trying to improve and better himself every time. And that, to me, sums up Norris. And listening to you guys talking about the dynamic between Ricciardo and Norris, you can't help thinking, what can Norris do?
I think it sums up golf. That's what he's done.
It sums up golf. There we go. Toto Wolff, Susie Wolff, goodbye, good night. Oh, I thought you were going to steal my microphone then. Oh, Toto said he was, but luckily he didn't. He was about to snatch my microphone, Jack.
That would have been great.
Would have been good. And they're obviously leaving for the day. They've had enough as well. Come back and join us, though, because tomorrow we'll have some more meaningful running once again with Free Practice 3. And there's quite a lot for the teams to work on tomorrow in Free Practice 3 because of this session. And then we will have qualifying as well. Qualifying taking place at 11 till 12. That's a good one. Stay up late for that. It'll be worth it. We'll see who's on pole position, and the race gets underway 8 o'clock on Sunday evening. So join us for that. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Thanks for sticking with us. It's been fun.